This is the second week of a new series called Church Clothes, and it doesn't have anything to do with what you actually wear to church, because we all know and understand that we live in a day and age where getting ready and getting your church clothes on doesn't mean the same thing it did when I was a kid. Do you remember growing up and having church clothes? For some reason, my church clothes were goofy. They would be like shorts and suspenders, and they'd have like a big sewn on something on the front of it, and it would match my brother, and we looked goofy as all get out. It was like, get ready for church, you're going to look funny. You're going to look like you're going to perform in a Broadway play. I don't know. I'm glad those days are over. Now you wear shorts and t-shirt. Just be ready for the golf course right here at church, right? If you go into the lake afterwards, you just wear your swimsuit here. It's no big deal. Ladies, we'd like for you to wear like a cover-up or something, but... And men, just go ahead and put your shirt on. That'll be better. But otherwise, you can wear whatever you want to church. What we're talking about is from Colossians 3, verse 12. Paul lays out something and he calls it clothing yourself, and I think it's so significant. He says, therefore, as God's chosen people. So you have to understand that he's talking to the church at this point. Therefore, church, you're God's chosen people. You know, when Paul says that, that's rather significant. You're talking about 10,000 years of the Hebrew people being claimed as God's chosen people. You're talking about somebody who was a Hebrew himself and studied under a rabbi, proclaiming that the Christian church is now God's chosen people. Not just the Hebrew people, but the Christian church. Anybody who's given their life to Christ is now God's chosen people. A great nation, a new kingdom has arrived. So we fit into that. Praise God. We're God's chosen people. We're the church. And because we're God's chosen people, Paul's going to call us to act, live, reason, exist differently than what we did before. See, when you make a commitment to follow Jesus, what you're doing is you're making a commitment to lay down your old life, to pick up your new life in him, and to live the way that he wants you to live. This is a challenge. This isn't some easy thing. A lot of times whenever we have people come to know the Lord, I think oftentimes we sell them a bill of goods so that they'll just come and commit their life to Jesus. Oh, your life will be better. You need to be saved. You get to go to heaven instead of hell. Please come forward and give your life to Jesus so that you have your golden ticket to heaven. Well, we don't tell them the rest of it. See, Jesus was really good at telling them the rest of it. You know some of the statements he made, and I've said those statements, and we try to make it clear that when we follow Jesus, he's willing to say to somebody who wants to follow him, are you sure you want to follow me? Before you make this decision with your whole life, you need to make sure that you're sure. Because if you follow me, it means you'll have to pick up your cross and follow me. It doesn't mean that life's just a breeze now and that everything's easier. In fact, it means that there is certain persecution that will come your way. There is certain challenges that will come your way. There's a thorn in the flesh that will happen whenever you commit your life to Jesus. This isn't some exciting new way of life that is free of all challenges and free of all earthly concerns. No. This is a life that says, despite the sacrifice that I'm going to have to make to lay down who I was and become who Jesus wants me to be, I'm still going to follow you because I believe in you and because I believe you came out of a grave 3 days later. And so for those of us who have made that decision to say, you know what, even though it's a challenge, and even though becoming a Christian isn't some easy peasy thing, and even though there's a lot that goes with becoming a Christian, and Jesus requires much of us in doing that, and as we read in Paul's letter, Paul gives us lots and lots of good guidelines to live our life by. Despite all of those things, I'm still going to follow Jesus. And the basic premise to why I'm going to follow Jesus is because I just believe in him. And I believe he's the Holy Son of God. And if he's not, then I've got problems. But I believe he is. I believe that he came, that he lived and showed us how to live, that he died on a cross for our sins, and that 3 days later he came out of that grave alive. And by the same Spirit that made him alive, I will be made alive in him through laying down my old self and picking up my new self. And in picking up my new self, Paul addresses some of the things we're supposed to put on after we give our life to Jesus. Last week, we talked about compassion. He says, holy and dearly loved, chosen people of God, clothe yourselves. Clothe yourselves. Meaning wrap yourselves up in compassion. And the second word that he uses is kindness. Humility, gentleness, and patience. We'll get to those, but this week we're going to talk about kindness. Kindness is considered by many to be the basic premise of the entire law of God. You step back and think of kindness and where it fits whenever you look at the Torah law of God, you realize that basically treating people the way you want to be treated is the law. Loving people and having kindness upon people is God's law. There's a wonderful story about Hillel the elder in 110 BC to 10 AD is when he lived, and he has a story in one of his texts that says that somebody came to him. He used a verse, Leviticus 19:18, when somebody came to him and challenged him. A Gentile came to him and challenged him and asked him to be converted. This Gentile wanted to give his life to following God, becoming a Hebrew at the time. Jesus hadn't come yet. But it was under one condition. This Gentile said, you have to convince me in enough time of while I'm standing on one foot. Hillel accepted him as a candidate for conversion to Judaism, and he drew on Leviticus 19:18 to brief the man. So this man challenges Hillel and says, okay, I want to become a Hebrew, but I'm only going to become a Hebrew if you can convince me and tell me the whole law of God while I'm standing on one foot. And I don't know about you, but for me, I can only stand on one foot for so long. If I have really good patience and I really think about it, I probably could stand on my foot for 10 seconds? I bet some of you could do a few minutes. And I bet there's some teenagers in here that could stand on one foot for an hour. But for most people, standing on one foot is not something that they're going to do for a very long time. And that was the premise behind this challenge. You have to convince me to give my life to God while I'm standing on one foot. And Hillel the elder, instead of drawing from the beginning, there was Adam and Eve, and there was this and there was that, and all these different stories from the Hebrew text, which is a big, giant text, right? He just went to one verse. And of all places, out of Leviticus. He said, what is hateful to you, do not do to your fellow. This is the whole Torah. The rest is the explanation. Go and learn. This is from the Shabbat Folio 31 Babylon Talmud. Leviticus 19:18, do not seek revenge or bear grudge against anyone among your people, but love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. So this elder, in explaining what the entire law of God meant, just went to this one verse and said, love your neighbor as yourself. Be kind. It's an interesting thing. We want to teach our children to be kind. So what do we tell them? We tell them the golden rule. Matthew 7, verse 12. So everything you do to others, so in everything do to others what you would have them do to you. For this sums up the law and the prophets. So do to others what you would have them do to you. This sums up the law and the prophets. This is Matthew drawing upon the same verse, Leviticus 19:18. This is Jesus speaking, and he is reverting back to this same verse. There is a history and there is a tradition, a long-standing tradition in the Hebrew faith, that being a Hebrew means doing unto others what you wouldn't have done unto yourself. And Jesus knows and understands that. Have grace and mercy and love unto those who hate you. Be kind. Be loving. You know, we teach our children this golden rule, and it's important that we teach them that. The problem is that as adults, we forget the golden rule. As adults, we start to think life should be fair. One of the greatest things that my father ever taught me is that life is not fair. I think he told me that like every day or every other day. Because I would go to him and say, Dad, my brother got a slushie and I didn't. Life's not fair, son. See, I think what we teach our children now is that life has to be fair and everything has to be equal. And if one person gets something, the other person gets something. So we go and we compete and we play baseball all weekend long. And there's a team that is the champion and they should be proud of being the champions, but everybody gets a trophy. Because life has to be fair. And instead of being able to lose and still have kindness, we just fix the problem by prescribing an antidote that is not from the Bible. And we prescribe this antidote called fairness. And so as adults, we start to believe that life should be fair in every situation. So when we leave the parking lot here, there'll be two lines trying to get out of the west exit. And you'll think that one car should go and the next car should go and one car should go and the next car should go. But there will be a car that piggybacks the car in front of you and it will make you mad because you think life should be fair. It's not the way it works. As adults, we need to understand that our kindness doesn't need to be dependent upon how we're treated. No. What does the golden rule teach us? Do unto others as you would want to be treated, not as you were treated. If the golden rule said, treat others the way they treat you, imagine how horrible marriage would be. Seriously. Imagine how horrible it would be to deal with people in our world if our thought process was, well, I have to treat them the way they treat me. And since they treated me rude, I'm going to be rude back. Really? Where in Scripture does it tell us to live that way? Since they cut me off, I'm going to cut them off. Since they acted this way towards me, I'm going to act this way towards them. No. Jesus says, love your neighbor the way you want to be treated, not the way that they treat you. So that's the challenge. If I'm supposed to clothe myself with kindness, then how do I put on a kindness that loves people despite the way that they treat me? How do I put on a kindness that loves people despite the evil in the world? In the age of social media, we have people going out and expressing their opinions all over the place and telling their opinions to the world, and they have thoughts and processes on everything, and then we respond to those things, and we believe that because somebody's opinion is against our opinion, that we have some right to hate them. Well, you took a knee during the national anthem, and you talked bad about our president, and because you behaved that way, I don't have any respect for you. I hate you. You're a piece of garbage. All that does is make you just as bad as them. You just jumped in the boat with them. You didn't maintain higher ground. You didn't maintain a higher moral code. You just jumped in the boat with them. You played their game. What if you said, listen, I totally disagree with you, and I think that you should stand during the national anthem, and you know what? I also think that you should respect the office of the President of the United States and should talk well of that office instead of talking negative of that office. But listen, just because you did something that I totally disagree with doesn't mean I hate you. In fact, my God tells me that I need to love you. I read a story yesterday. It was a fantastic story. You know U2. Anybody know U2? The rock band? In the name of love, one night in the name of love. They sing some good songs. Rebecca and I got to go see U2, and it was crazy. The Black Eyed Peas opened up for them. We had no interest in seeing the Black Eyed Peas, but they were kind of fun. And they could sing. That Fergie girl could sing. Fergalicious definitions make the voice go crazy. But we got to go, and we were at OU's Memorial Stadium, and we were up at the very top of this stadium. Like, I'm talking fourth row from the top in the end zone, and this stage went from one 10-yard line to the other 10-yard line. It was the biggest stage I've ever seen. It looked like a spaceship. It was awesome. But we're up there, and we're like, well, we're here. And a guy comes over to us, and he has these lanyard things. He says, y'all want to move closer? It's like somebody walking up to you. You want this $100 bill? No, you keep it. I'm good. Yes, we want to move closer. We're at the top. So we go down, and we are literally like 15 rows from the stage, and we're excited, and we got close. Bono is singing, and he's awesome, and it's fun. They sing some cool songs that have to do with God. He ended up singing Amazing Grace. U2 did, which was one of the coolest things I've ever seen, to see all of these people in this stadium just singing at the top of their lungs Amazing Grace to God. Well, I read this story yesterday about Bono that is really neat. He used to, at his concerts, rip on President George Bush, the first President Bush. And he would actually call the White House on the phone while he was at concerts and try to get a hold of George Bush to like be mean to him. And then when George Bush's son, after Clinton became president, and then George Bush's son, George W. Bush, became president, Bono was pretty rough on him. And what George Bush did was one of the coolest things I've ever heard of. He called Bono in for lunch. He said, hey, Bono, I know you talk bad about me, but we agree on something. I want you to talk about it with me. Why don't you come to lunch? And they had lunch at the White House. And then after they had lunch, they went in the Oval Office and talked for 40 minutes. And President Bush knew that Bono had this really big heart for people in Africa, and that he was trying to help people in Africa. And so President George W. Bush and him talked, and George W. Bush, after this conversation, began to start an initiative in Africa where America was able to send some money and help out. And we have helped in a massively significant way. You're talking about over 14 million people have been helped because of this conversation that Bono had with George W. Bush in the White House, because somebody was able to say, even though you're really, really mean, rude, obnoxious to me, I want to have you come to lunch. I want to get to know you. I want to find some ground we can find in common. It was neat because Bono was going through Texas the other day, and he made sure to stop by George W. Bush's land and hang out with him and spend some time. Two totally opposites on the political spectrum, but they found common ground in love. Both of them had a heart for the folks in Africa that were suffering from AIDS and malaria, so they did something about it. Wonderful story. What if we had that kind of heart towards the people who totally disagree with us? What if we didn't get on Facebook and make ourselves look like fools? What if instead we said, man, I totally disagree with this, but I love you anyways. I love you anyways because my God says that I have to. So I'm going to. I'm going to follow his laws and his decrees, and I'm not going to fall into the trap of believing that because I disagree with you, I have to hate you. Instead, what if the church was able to somehow look at the world that we disagree with and say, we disagree with you and we love you radically. We don't agree with your lifestyle. We don't agree with your opinions. We don't agree with this business, but we love you anyways. And we are willing to sit down and have a conversation with you. We're willing to try to find some common ground and meet at love. And ultimately, folks, here's the big deal as Christians. When we have this kind of love towards people who don't love us in return, we now are able to have an opportunity to deliver the gospel to somebody who hasn't heard it. Because you loved me, I was willing to listen to you. Because you took the time to invite me, I was willing to love in return. The golden rule should be early taught, but listen, folks, and I find this in my life too, it should be long remembered. It shouldn't be something that we forget. When we get cut off in traffic, when our spouse does something we don't like, when we log onto the internet and we see some horrible thing that we totally disagree with, the golden rule should be long remembered. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Don't do unto others the way they treat you. Don't do unto others the way that you seem fit or what is fair. Remember, God says, I will have vengeance. It's mine. You're not allowed to have it. Romans 12. Ephesians 4:32. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as Christ God forgave you. See, the church should be full of individuals who exemplify a Christ-like kindness to those around them. Instead, oftentimes the church seems to be filled with individuals that have some spite towards those around them, that tend to hold on to grudges, that tend to remember what somebody did bad to us. We tend not to forgive. We tend to be a little bit hateful. And it's time for the church to bill all that in. To be be done with that nasty business. To get over our pride and our self-righteousness and get to a place that despite the fact that folks treat us bad, despite the fact that folks don't agree with us morally, despite the fact that folks argue with us or cut us off in traffic or steal from us or talk mean to us, we are going to love them with the love of Christ in return and nothing else. Listen, I had to spend a moment whenever I did this sermon being sure that my heart was right. Because God revealed some things to me that were not real fun to have to deal with. He said, Greg, you do that. You get frustrated. You react to people the way they treat you instead of the way I want you to. When your wife treats you mean, you treat her mean back instead of loving her. You're like a kid. Greg, remember kindness. I had to give that to God. And so this morning, we've got a little time, and I just want you to have a moment. If you feel like you've got something building up inside of you that you need to lay down, you've got some anger, some fear, some frustration, some hate towards others who disagree with you, who aren't on the same playing field as you, and you need to lay that stuff down and choose to pick up righteousness and choose to pick up kindness, put it in your heart, and love others the way you want to be treated instead of the way they treat you. If that's you this morning, I just want you to have a moment to give that to God. If you want to come forward and pray and ask God to help you with that, if you want somebody to pray with you, if you want to pray in your seat, you're more than welcome to do that. But I feel like the Spirit is moving in this place and wants some of us to get healed of this anger and frustration that we have inside towards others. Wants us to lay it down. If God is nudging you to move this morning, please do not deny the Holy Spirit. Please allow the Spirit to move inside of your heart and inside of you. Let's stand. If you need to come forward and pray, I'm just going to invite you right now. If you need to lay down some of this stuff, some of this frustration, choose kindness over hate and anger and over responding selfishly. Instead, we're going to respond in God's love. I just want to invite you forward right now. Come and pray. If you need to pray at your seat, where you're at, let's walk out of here today ready to express God's kindness no matter how somebody treats us. Let's respond to them in love, mercy, care, grace. A grace that is only known by knowing the forgiveness of Christ Jesus and what it means for our lives.